This video details the fabrication and installation of the BlackFin expandable wall dynamic socket system. Identify the location for the spinner system. Traditionally on a below-knee socket, the posterior aspect is ideal. The system can also be installed on the interosseous groove or the medial tibial flare. Any area that is typically loaded during regular prosthetic modifications is acceptable. Distal lateral placement on a transfemoral socket is ideal. Begin fabrication by pulling the flexible inner socket over the model. ProFlex with silicone is recommended for the inner socket. Plastic thickness should be 1/8 inch to 3/16 inch thick. Thicker plastic can impede the movement of the spinner system. Mold 1/8 inch thick firm peelite over the model. Padding thickness and material can vary. Heat the carboplast panel at 400 degrees and mold to model when malleable. Ideally, the panel should be 1/3 of the width of the socket. Consider how the panel is going to deflect the inner socket. Flat panels are more effective than panels with a large radius. Trim the panel and the pad to the desired shape. Ensure that the pad extends beyond the edge of the panel. Separate the temporary bond between the panel and the pad. Apply carpet tape to the panel. Trim the edges and adhere the two together such that there is a permanent bond and no movement can occur between the two pieces. In this video, the system is fabricated over a copy of the flexible inner socket. Fabrication can be done directly over the flexible inner. Bond the molding dummy to the panel. Use a small amount of quickset adhesive. Apply it on the concave side of the dummy. The dummy will later be removed from the panel during the fabrication process. Ensure that the straight edges of the dummy are perpendicular to the floor. Also be aware of the direction or the plane of the face of the dummy. This will dictate the knob direction or protrusion from the socket, as well as how the drive system interacts with the panel. After the adhesive is cured, inspect the molding dummy position. Ensure the molding dummy is perpendicular to the plate. If any underhangs between the dummy and the panel exist, fill them with plumber's putty. Apply a removable adhesive to the foam side of the panel combination and adhere it to the model. You may now begin fabrication of the socket. The socket can be thermoformed or laminated. When laminating the socket, the PVA bag is pulled over the panel assembly. After the socket is fabricated, ensure the socket conforms around the contours of the molding dummy and the panel assembly. Mark the area where the molding dummy resides. Grind the socket surface down to the molding dummy. The aperture in the socket should be perfectly circular with good conformity around the dummy. Break out the model and finish the trim lines of the socket. After the socket's fabricated, locate the threaded base inside the spinner kit. A rubber stop bumper will need to be installed inside the base. Locate the orange rubber bumper. Apply some silicone lubricant to the bumper and insert it into the notch in the threaded base. The bumper should not extend beyond the top of the threaded base. Insert the threaded base into the interior of the socket. Make sure the flat parts of the base align with the imprint of the molding dummy inside the socket. Apply silicone lubricant to the sides of the drive nut. Insert the drive nut into the threaded base. The drive nut should be inserted at an angle with one of the hex sides firmly against the rubber bumper. If the nut is correct, you will not be able to see the base of the brass inserts. The nut is upside down if you are able to see the brass insert bases. Once in position, simply snap the drive nut into place. Inspect the rubber bumper and ensure that it has not been displaced or moved during the installation process. Fasten the retention nut on the exterior portion of the socket. Hand tighten the nut until it sits firmly on the threaded base. Use Loctite 242 on the threaded base if this is the final installation. Use a micro screwdriver to press the three 1.6 millimeter screws through the control knob. Ensure the screws are pressed all the way through the control knob. Align the screws with the brass inserts in the drive nut. Using a micro screwdriver, hand tighten all 3 screws in the control knob. If this is the final installation, use Loctite 242 on all 3 screws. The assembly of the control knob is now complete. Verify that you can feel a positional shift when turning the dial. Ensure the threaded base is correctly and fully seated within the socket recess. The final step in the assembly process is to attach the drive post to the panel. Pierce a small hole through a piece of saran wrap or thin plastic and insert the drive post through. This will protect the assembly during the bonding process. Insert the plastic and the drive post through the interior of the socket. Hand wind the drive post into the fully retracted position. Smooth the plastic so it protects the interior of the socket. Test fit the pad and panel assembly, ensuring that they sit within the recess in the socket. Remove the panel and apply fast set adhesive to the face of the drive post. Use just enough adhesive to bond the panel to the face. Do not use too much adhesive as it will fill the circular holes around the face of the drive post, which are used as drill guides later in the process. Insert the panel into the socket and place it on top of the face of the drive post and the adhesive. Hold the pad firmly in place. It is necessary to have good contact between the drive post and the panel. It may be necessary to wind the drive post towards the panel a few quarter turns to ensure there is good contact. Hold and maintain the position of the panel until the adhesive is fully cured. Carefully remove the drive post and panel from the socket assembly. Hold the panel while you turn the control knob to back the drive post inward into the socket. It's helpful to hold the panel as you turn the knob so that no movement occurs. Be careful not to break the panel and the drive post bond during this process. Remove the plastic barrier from the drive post and panel. Verify that the drive post is perpendicularly mounted to the panel. All 6 holes of the face should be visible. Identify the most proximal and distal holes in the post face. Using a 1/8 inch drill bit, carefully drill out the proximal and distal holes in the drive post attachment face. Additional holes can be drilled if desired. Inspect the holes, ensure that they are clear and free of debris. Use a small countersink drill bit to slightly countersink both the proximal and distal holes in the drive post attachment face. Inspect the panel once again to make sure the holes are clear. Locate the 2 1/8 inch aluminum rivets in the spinner assembly kit. Insert the rivets such that the head of the rivet is closest to the drive post. Insert both rivets through the face and carefully push them through the panel and post, taking care not to break the post loose. The rivet heads should be recessed and flush with the surface of the drive post face. Trim the aluminum rivets on the back side of the panel. Leave just enough rivet just to secure the panel to the drive post. Before beginning the riveting process, it may be necessary to fill any gaps between the drive post and the panel. When riveting, use very careful technical riveting. You do not want to crack, bend, or deflect the face of the drive post. The drive post should be perfectly perpendicular to the drive rod with no bend. Inspect the drive post face, ensure that it is flat and has not been bent due to the riveting process. Fill any underlying gaps with fast set epoxy. The rivet heads should be countersunk and sit nicely within the face of the drive post. The drive post should be perpendicular to the force plate panel. Apply 2-sided carpet tape to the pad on the force applicator panel. Cover the pad entirely. Trim the tape after application to fit the pad size. The entirety of the pad on the force applicator panel should be covered with carpet tape adhesive. It is critical to note that the drive panel assembly must be bonded permanently to the pad and that the pad must be adhered securely to the flexible inner liner. Once bonded, the panel assembly will push the flexible inner socket inward, creating an expansion between the inner and outer sockets. No rotation can occur between the panel assembly and the flexible inner socket. If rotation occurs, the drive knob or control knob will be rendered useless and patient injury can occur. Complete the final assembly by inserting the drive rod and panel into the interior of the socket. Align the drive rod with the drive nut and wind the control knob and fully retract the panel and pad. It's helpful to hold both the pad and panel as you retract the system. Insert the flexible inner socket into the exterior frame. Ensure that the drive post and panel are in the fully retracted position. Snap the two sockets together until an intimate fit is established. Pull back the flexible inner socket and remove the carpet tape from the force applicator panel. This will create a secure bond holding the applicator panel in place in the correct spot on the flexible inner liner. The socket is now ready to be trial fit on the patient. The drive post is left intentionally long during the fitting process so the clinician and patient can determine the optimal amount of travel. A minimum of 1/2 inch of the drive post length will need to be removed prior to delivering the device to the patient. Determine the optimal amount of drive post translation during your fitting session. Mark the drive post and remove the excess drive post section. Remove the excess material on the post, either by grinding it or utilize a hacksaw to remove the unwanted section. There is no need to remove the assembly when grinding or cutting the excess post. Measure the drive post after the cut and ensure that there is only 3/8 inch to 1/2 inch of the drive post sticking out in the fully retracted position. If measuring the drive post out of the socket or if the drive post is cut prior to installation, a maximum of 1 1/4 inch length is acceptable. Install the limiter to the drive post. Begin by hand threading the limiter into the end of the drive post. Use a wrench to fully seat the limiter against the drive post. The limiter will prevent excess forward translation of the drive post into the socket.